Welcome to a Community Partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Davy, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Cathy Barrick, the Chief Executive Officer of the Alzheimer Society of Ontario. The Alzheimer Society of Ontario, also known as ASO, was founded in 1983 and is the province's leading care and research charity committed to helping people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Thanks for joining us today, Cathy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Well, to begin, why don't you tell us and our viewers a little bit more about yourself and perhaps what inspired you to work with work at the Alzheimer Society of Ontario and with individuals with disabilities as a whole?
Thanks, Davy. It's actually a really great story. I grew up with really amazing grandparents. And so most of my most favorite childhood memories involve my grandparents in some way or another. And as bad luck would have it, 3 of my 4 grandparents actually had dementia. So when I went to university, I actually knew I wanted to work with older people because of my amazing relationship with my grandparents. And I went into social work and took gerontology. And, then my first job right out of university was working on a dementia unit. And since then, I've sort of traveled around throughout my career, but made my way back to working with people living with dementia. And it's the best job in the world.
And that really is an amazing story. And I can definitely relate to you on the grandparent front in that sense. And I wish, and a lot of the questions that I have now, I wish I'd known the answers to, of which I'm sure you're going to give us, when my grandmother was going through her bouts of dementia in her last few days. But today is not about me. Today is about you. So the next question that I got for you, do you think that you could tell us a little bit about what Alzheimer's is and how someone would know if they would need to be seen by a professional?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that a lot of people don't know the answer to. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to explain it a little bit. So Alzheimer's is one form of a disease, a brain disease that can cause dementia. So dementia is really a symptom of the disease process, but Alzheimer's is just one kind. And so I actually like to explain it. Most people understand the cancer analogy. So when you think of cancer, you know that there's all different types of cancer. There's breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, etc. So the same is true with dementia. So there's Alzheimer's, there's vascular dementia, there's Lewy body dementia, etc. There's several kinds. And really, the kinds that you have really just speaks to the pathology that's happening in your brain. But the symptoms of the various types of dementia, there's certainly similarities in all of the dementias that occur. And, obviously confusion and memory loss are probably the most common ones. In terms of when to know whether you should see somebody about that, I would say if it's even crossed your mind that you think your brain is not working the way it used to, I think that is reason enough to get checked out. And it's really important to consider, your own brain function, in relation to how it's normally worked. If you've never had a super great memory, if you've kind of always lost your keys and, misplaced things, doing that is not necessarily reason for concern. But not being able to do things that you've normally been able to do. And sometimes it's things as simple as signing your name. Sometimes it's something maybe a little bit more challenging, like balancing your checkbook or remembering to pay your bills, or, if you find your milk in the cupboard instead of the refrigerator. It's things like that, things that are very out of character for how you would normally be in your daily life. That's when you would want to go and get your brain checked out.
Fair enough. Now, on the flip side, you also mentioned that dementia was sort of an extension of Alzheimer's at that?
Yes. So dementia really kind of speaks to the functioning of the brain and sort of what happens. So when you think of dementia, you think of people who are very confused, perhaps forgetful. They start to, not recognize the people in their lives, and it affects, their daily functioning. But dementia also, it's a biological process that's happening in your brain. So it has other symptoms as well, which include other sort of ways that affect your body. So, for example, I mean, it's affecting your brain. So when you think of Alzheimer's as an example, the process of Alzheimer's, it over time sort of creates holes essentially in your brain matter. And so the parts of your brain that are affected by those holes that are being created by the Alzheimer's disease process, depending on what area that is, that affects could affect all kinds of things. It could affect your ability to walk. It could affect your ability to swallow. Our brains are the computer center of our entire body. Your brain tells you how to breathe, swallow, digest, all of those things. So as those parts of your brain are being affected negatively by the process of the disease within your brain, it affects all parts of your functioning.
I see. Now, now, on a personal note, I know I 9 years ago. No, sorry, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I lost my grandmother to dementia, and I saw a lot of those same signs affecting her in her final days as well. The confusion, the not recognizing people. To that end, for anyone, anyone who's sort of like observing someone experiencing dementia, do you think that you could tell us what the warning signs are, of which I believe that there are 10?
Yeah. So again, it sort of goes back to what I said earlier in the sense of, what are changes that you're noticing in the people around you that are very unusual for that person. So it may be things like being forgetful, misplacing things. It could be personality changes as well. So if someone's been sort of very happy-go-lucky their whole life, and all of a sudden they seem to be really cantankerous or suspicious, sometimes paranoid, that can be a warning sign. Again, you have to look at it in the sense of sort of what is the person's normal functioning. If the person's always been kind of cantankerous, that's obviously not a warning sign of dementia. But if there's change over time, there can also be changes in mood. So a lot of times, actually very commonly, dementia is misdiagnosed in the early days as depression or anxiety. So those are some of the things that you would want to be watching for.
Fair enough. Now, taking a step away from Alzheimer's and dementia as topics of their own. In preparing for this interview with you today, I noticed on your website, on the ASO website, that there's something called Become Dementia Friendly. Do you think that you could tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is one of our initiatives. We've actually been doing it for many years, and it really is looking for community members. So businesses, libraries, doctors' offices, everywhere that we may go in our daily life, and working with those organizations, whether they be businesses, other charities, libraries, as I mentioned, as an example, and teaching them about what dementia is. So how they might recognize if someone comes into their establishment that may be showing signs of dementia. But probably the most important thing is to actually teach them how to interact with them. So think about this in terms of, think about your grandmother. Imagine if she went to the grocery store, a grocery store that she'd been to many times. Maybe it's, a neighborhood grocery, and she starts having difficulty, paying for the order because she doesn't understand money. She doesn't understand, that a 20 plus a 5 equals $25, things like that. And so we actually work with the staff at these places to help them understand what dementia is, and how they might be able to interact with people with dementia in a way that's really respectful, that allows people with dementia to remain as independent and autonomous as they possibly can throughout their disease. As well, we talk about how to detect perhaps if someone has gotten so confused that they actually don't know how to get home. And so we actually have a program very similar to dementia-friendly communities. It's actually called Finding Your Way. And it is a program designed to help prevent people with dementia going missing. That can also be one of the things that happens throughout the dementia journey is people, we used to call it wandering, and we don't use that term anymore because people with dementia are actually very intentional about where they think they're going. The problem is that, because of the dementia, they may get confused, get lost, or the place that they think they're going may be actually way too far for them to get to. So again, through dementia-friendly communities and Finding Your Way, we teach people how to interact with people with dementia, how to support them, if it's paying for the groceries or using their library card, but also how to notice or be aware if it looks like the person with dementia may be in distress, perhaps from being lost, and how to intervene then, which would include calling the police, frankly, to make sure that the person with dementia got home safely.
Fair enough. Now, on the note of interaction, support, and awareness, being that you are you are part of the the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, I'm sure you would know a lot about Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Now, do you think that you could tell us and our viewers about what happens during this time?
Yeah, so Alzheimer's Awareness Month is really sort of our month to shine, in the sense of, creating awareness across Ontario and across the country and the world, frankly, about what dementia is. And so we actually focus on a couple of really key things throughout that month. One of them is around prevention. So some aspects of disease risk are actually modifiable, which means there are lifestyle changes that you can make, that we can all make, that we should make, that can actually help reduce our risk. So we want to, spread the word about reducing risk. The other thing that we talk a lot about during Awareness Month as well is reducing stigma. So sadly, having dementia is something that many people still want to hide. They feel embarrassed or ashamed about it. Sometimes the people that they're interacting with, compound that feeling, not necessarily because they're trying to be hurtful, but because they may say things that are insensitive or not really know how to interact with the person with dementia. And, when people around us are struggling with dementia, they're perhaps being more confused or they're repeating themselves, things like that. It can be challenging as a person to interact with them. So we really just want to spread the word about, how to support people living with dementia so that the stigma is reduced, that it's not something that people should be afraid of. We encourage people to be open about it so that the people around them can be supportive of them.
Fair enough. Now, one could even argue that stigma that stigma is a continued problem, sure. But on the one hand, in your opinion, again, other than stigma, what do you think of the many things? What is one thing you see happening over and over again to individuals with disabilities that shouldn't be happening, and how do we collectively go about stopping it?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that people make assumptions about what people are able or not able to do, and that goes for all disabilities. And so with, specifically regarding dementia, assuming that, the person is confused, they can't really participate in something, or they wouldn't get much out of it, I think is a real disservice, obviously, to the person with dementia, because you may be denying them, maybe out of your own good intentions, you don't want to, stress or upset them. But you're denying them an opportunity to have really meaningful connection with people. And while they may not be able to participate in an activity to the full extent that they may have in the past, just being with people and participating in something, having meaningful activity is so helpful for people with dementia. And I think that would go across the board with people with any type of disability. I think we want to include people no matter what, and to the best of their ability. I mean, you may want to have, in the case of dementia, you may want to have a backup plan if it doesn't sort of go according to plan. I remember once I took a gentleman to a Blue Jay game. He had been a huge sports fan and he had young onset dementia. So I took him to a Blue Jay game, and, he was actually, fairly advanced in his disease at this time. He really had difficulties with language, etc. Anyways, the Blue Jay game ended up being way too overwhelming for him. It was just too noisy, and our seats were too far away. I don't think he really felt connected to the game, etc. So we left early, and we went and walked around a bit and got a bite to eat. So I think always having a plan B, just in case it doesn't go as planned, is a good thing. But always try to include people, and don't assume that what they can or cannot do.
Perfectly fair. Perfectly fair. Now, on the note of including people, if, say, someone wished to become a volunteer or a member as part of the organization, if someone were interested in becoming a volunteer or joining the organization as a member, what would the process for either volunteering or becoming a member look like?
So we actually don't have members in our organization any longer, other than the board of directors are members. But volunteers, we live and breathe with the support of volunteers. And probably the best approach if someone wanted to volunteer with the Alzheimer's Society is actually to look at the local Alzheimer's Societies. So the local Alzheimer's Societies, there's there's 26 local societies across the province in communities everywhere. And so connecting with the Alzheimer's Society that's in your community would probably be the best approach. And they have all sorts of opportunities to participate in programs. So you may be able to go in and support a program for people living with dementia. But there's also other opportunities. You know, we have all kinds of events. We have a big walk actually that's coming up in May. We're always looking for volunteers to support the walk, things like that. But we love volunteers and we couldn't do what we do without them.
Fair enough. Now, during my taking another shift here, during my research, I also noticed a number of programs on your and services on your website as well. Just jumping back to the beginning, do you think that you could help me understand which of those programs or services is the most popular?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, we have all kinds of programs and services, and they're for people living with dementia themselves, but also we do a lot of care partner support. So whoever it is that's affected by someone else's dementia, whether you're a direct, full-time care partner, the person lives with you and you're sort of on 24/7 to help assist them, or you may be a virtual care partner, etc. So we have both kinds of programs. For care partners, I think, for both actually, for care partners and people living with dementia, we have a program. It's called First Link, and it's actually a care navigation program. So one of the things we know for sure is that the healthcare system is a bit tricky to navigate. And when you receive a diagnosis like dementia, it's a very life-altering type of diagnosis. It can feel very overwhelming to know where to turn. What services are even available? What should I be thinking about in terms of dementia? So our First Link care navigation program is exactly that. We actually help you navigate the healthcare system. So we want, if you have a diagnosis of dementia, or even if you don't have a diagnosis yet, but you think that things are looking towards that you're concerned about your brain and your memory, we encourage you to reach out for First Link, and we'll sort of take you by the hand and guide you through the process, let you know what services are available. Again, as I mentioned earlier, things that you should be thinking about if a diagnosis of dementia is something that's happening. Things like getting your legal affairs in order and thinking about what type of care you want to have, things like that. So I'd say that's probably our number one most popular program, both for care partners and people living with dementia. We also offer individual counseling and support groups for both care partners and people living with dementia. Those are very popular because, a problem shared, it's a problem halved, I think is the proverb as it goes. So, sharing with others the experience that you're having, the grief that comes with it, the fear, all of those things is really beneficial. We also have social recreation programs, and these are geared towards people living with dementia, but care partners are often included as well. So one program in particular that's really popular is called Minds in Motion. And so it's a program that the care partner and the person living with dementia come to together. There's some sort of healthy activity at the beginning of the session. So those vary between, some perhaps light and safe exercise, or maybe some brain games, something active that, gets you doing something. And then the second half of the program is really kind of like a coffee session. So, informal, and people can chat and connect. And what you actually see in the sort of coffee portion of the program, you see the care partners kind of collecting in one corner of the room, and they're chatting, and making connections. And, many of these people become friends and socialize outside of our programs. But you see the care partners chatting and getting support from each other and saying, this is what I'm dealing with. How about you? Do you have any suggestions? That kind of thing. And you see this, the people living with dementia doing the same thing. They're, connecting. Now, whether they're able to have as robust a conversation, that doesn't really matter. They're connecting with other people. They feel happy. They're included. And what you hear actually the most coming out of the rooms as Minds in Motion is going on is laughter. People are just having a really good time. So those are some of our most popular programs.
Fair enough. And and other than your popular programs or or any sort of events that you may be taking part in during, say, Alzheimer's Awareness Month, are there any other events coming up that the viewers should know about, that our listeners should know about in terms of the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario taking part in?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, our Walk for Alzheimer's is our biggest event of the year, essentially. They happen all the way across Ontario, and it's Saturday, May 24th this year. So the weekend of May 24th, not the long weekend, it's the weekend after. There's walks happening in communities all across the province. So as I mentioned earlier, we need volunteers for that event, but we also need walkers. We need people to sign up and commit to coming out to walk. If you can raise some funds that support these programs that I'm talking about, that would be amazing. These programs go directly to the communities in which you're walking to help support the local programs and services.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, if our listeners are looking for more information, be it in terms of any programs or services that you offer, or even just how they can reach you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably our website. And it's a pretty easy one to remember. It's alzheimer.ca. When you get to that main landing page, there's actually a place there you can sort of toggle to the actual society that you're looking for. So let's say you live in Peterborough, you can go and click on that Peterborough link, and it'll take you right to their page, and it'll give you sort of up to the minute, program availability, events, all that kind of stuff that's happening in Peterborough. So make sure when you go to that main landing page, you find the Alzheimer's Society you're looking for, and then it takes you right to your community.
All right. Well, then, thank you, Cathy, for being here with us today. We really did. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. And with that, we've reached the end of yet another amazing interview. You're listening to Community Partners presented by Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. I'm your host, Davy. Be safe, be kind, and I'll see you all next time.